Disciplining bishops and priests. Pope Francis creates a tribunal to investigate sexual abuse within the Roman Catholic Church. So will the guilty finally be punished? And can this decision root out sexual abuse by the clergy? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mike Hanna. The Roman Catholic Church has been plagued by sexual abuse scandals for a long time, with a growing movement of Catholics around the world demanding the Vatican take action and hold its own officials to account. That call has now been answered by Pope Francis, who in an unprecedented decision has approved the creation of a Vatican tribunal to judge and punish its clerics. But as we'll be discussing in a moment with our guests, not everyone is satisfied by the announcement. First, though, take a listen to Vatican spokesman Federico Lombardi.
The thing that is new is that a specific procedure is now indicated for these questions that have to do with a bishop's abuse of office. This was certainly not the case before. An ordinary and clear path, this is a real new aspect.
So as mentioned there, this marks a big shift for the Vatican, because it's the first time bishops will face scrutiny for their actions. Until now, bishops could only be disciplined directly by the Pope, and no Pope has ever demoted a bishop for abuse of office. But critics question how effective a Vatican tribunal will be in judging its colleagues, while little is known about the punishment bishops would face if found guilty, and whether they will be forced to face criminal prosecution.
These are photos of us at the age we were when the priest sexually violated us.
Barbara Blaine points out members of her survivors network she says still suffer emotional scars from sexual abuse they suffered as children at the hands of priests. She was one of those kids. Blaine says if the Vatican is serious about rooting out abusive priests, it doesn't need a special tribunal.
We know that Pope Francis has complete authority to take whatever action he wants. If he wanted to, he could have sacked any bishop at any time. And he is the boss.
Bowing to criticism from victims and advocacy groups, the Vatican says its new tribunal will examine complaints of bishops covering up sexual abuse and adjudicate them. It will lay out a formal process by which the Vatican can deal with bishops negligent in handling abuse cases in their districts. But Blaine is demanding more transparency from the Pope and resources from outside the Vatican as well.
He should open up the files and turn over all information that he has about sex crimes to police and prosecutors. There shouldn't be investigations within the church. We're talking about criminal action here.
The Pope's actions come more than a year after the United Nations issued a scathing report calling on the Vatican to end a code of silence on sex abuse cases and enforcing rules requiring local church leaders to report abuse to authorities. Also last year, the Chicago Archdiocese released thousands of pages of secret documents alleging abuse by dozens of priests against more than 350 children dating back to the 1950s. It's paid out more than $130 million to settle claims by abuse victims, the most recent coming a month ago for more than $1.2 million. Blaine says her organization gets more than 6,000 calls a year from victims in nearly 80 countries. While she's skeptical about the tribunal, she hopes it will do some good.
It's hard to think that they are good at policing themselves, but it sure would be nice if someone would hold them accountable.
Diane Estabrook, Al Jazeera, Chicago.
For more on this, I'm joined by our guests. From London, Michael Walsh, papal historian and author of The Conclave, A Sometimes Secret and Occasional Bloody History. From Chicago, Barbara Blaine, who you saw in our earlier package. She's the founder and president of SNAP, the survivors network of those abused by priests. And also joining us in London, Jack Valero, founder of Catholic Voices and press officer for Opus Dei UK. Welcome to you all. Let's begin with Michael Walsh. How significant do you believe this move is by Pope Francis?
Very significant. One of the problems with bishops is that they're pretty well untouchable, you know. and to put them, in a sense, to put them on trial, to make them accountable like this is a major step forward. Not, I think, I mean, it's actually relating immediately to child abuse, but I hope it's a step forward in generally making them accountable to the church at large.
Jack Valero, your view?
Yes, I think it's a great move, and this is particularly because it has been requested by members of the Commission for the Protection of Minors, which includes 2 victims of abuse, Peter Saunders and Marie Collins. And just today they said they welcome this development, and they've been very vocal in calling for it. So it's really good that they've been listened to. And
Barbara Blaine, what's your view?
Well, we recommend that we all withhold judgment. You know, it's the clerics who will be investigating themselves, and anytime someone is investigating themselves, we know that it's questionable. So I agree with everyone that we should be hopeful and you know, trust. I mean, we have to, right? Because children remain at risk. So there's every reason to be hopeful, but history and past experiences haven't played out. I mean, so far, not even one bishop or church official has been punished for knowingly transferring and assisting, enabling the sexual perpetrators.
Well, Michael Walsh, one of the interesting things about this proposed commission is that it appears that the church is making clear that omission is in itself a punishable offense. The bishop who does not volunteer information, though not guilty of any action himself, must be held accountable. That is a shift in thinking, is it not?
I'm not sure that it is a shift in thinking. I mean, I think in a way this whole affair has been precipitated by a situation in the United States where the Bishop of Kansas City was found criminally responsible by a court in Kansas City for not having exactly doing that, for omitting to tell, to report sexual abuse of children by one of his clergy. It took him 5 months to resign his office, and then he did so. So Bishop Finn has retired. But clearly that is a situation which perhaps is, well, I'm sure it's a situation that's occurred elsewhere, where bishops have disguised the misdemeanors of their clergy. And when this has come to light, they haven't been held accountable, and now they are being held accountable, which is a major step forward. I think the point that the lady from SNAP made, that it is a question that one of the problems with this is that it is a question of clerics judging clerics. I think that's a very fair point and should be addressed.
Well, Barbara Blaine, I mean, also the issue that is immediately being questioned is the transparency of proceedings of this body. How hopeful are you that there will be transparent processes for the public and Catholics around the world to see?
Well, we all know that the Vatican operates with loads of secrecy. That's their modus operandi, and the public is left out all the time. And it's, you know, it's a monarch, and the Pope has all the authority and can make whatever decision he chooses at any time. And unfortunately, he refuses to make the tough decisions that would actually protect children. And I disagree with the idea that this is an American problem. I mean, the bishops all over the world have been involved in covering up these sex crimes and been exposed. We've just seen an amazing outpouring of support for the victims. And when a bishop in Chile was recently named to the diocese, and it's Archbishop or Bishop Barros, and he, I mean, during his ceremony just last month or the month, I think it was in May, he was when he was to be installed, thousands of people came out to object to his being installed as their bishop, because victims have claimed that he was actually in the room watching as a very famous or notorious perpetrator Father Karadima was sexually molesting them. So we can't claim that this is in any one particular region in the world. It's global.
I think the point that it is global is taken note of, mentioning as well that a cardinal in Australia, for example, is being brought before a government commission there. But Jack Valero, you mentioned the fact that this commission arises out of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors, which was set up by Pope Francis. Now, that has 17 members. Among those are victims. They are also representatives, lay people. It is not a purely body of priests judging priests. Wouldn't have been more effective if this commission was set up along the same lines?
We don't know how the tribunal will be set up yet. One thing that's important to know is that this tribunal does not replace the civil law process. So people who are abused can go to the police, should go to the police, and priests who are seen to be abusers should be reported to the police, and bishops who are not doing their job should be reported to the police. So all these processes go ahead simultaneously, and this tribunal of the church does not replace any of that. This tribunal is purely the disciplinary procedure of how to deal with bishops. As Michael said, we didn't have a procedure to deal with bishops that had done something wrong. When a court said that they'd done something wrong, we didn't have a procedure. So now we will have a procedure, a tribunal. We don't know how the tribunal will be made up, but that will be in addition to the civil law. And, you know, for example, the bishop in Chile that was mentioned by Barbara Blaine has been taken to court but has not been found guilty of anything at the moment. That's why he's still at large. If he had been found guilty of something, then he would face the law. And the tribunal in that case would also examine his case. And if the civil court had said that he was guilty, he would be fired. And that's the process that we need in the church, that the internal process follows the civil process and finishes it. And we didn't have this last step. This is the bit that's been added by Pope Francis.
Well, Michael Walsh, I mean, this concept of two systems operating side by side in a way, the civil law, criminal law, and then the church's own proceedings. Is there any possibility that there would be bleed over between the two? In other words, that evidence from the investigations by the tribunal could be used in criminal cases?
Well, I suppose that's the case. I mean, one of the problems about this, there are two things really, two problems. One is that the Pope isn't actually all powerful, as he's often presented as such. I mean, he can't just sack bishops. Bishops, according to Catholic theory, I mean, it may be a mistake to think this, but this is the way the Church does think, are appointed, in a sense, by God. They get their authority from God, so the Pope simply cannot remove them. It doesn't work like that. The other thing is that the procedures that are...
The Pope could certainly transfer them. The Pope could transfer them to a new location and take them out of that post. We see that happen all the time.
That's one of the things that people were complaining about priests, that they were transferred from one place where they're abusing to another place where they could abuse. I mean, he can't actually really remove them from office. It's not as simple as that. But let's not go down that thing. The other problem about the Vatican is, of course, I totally agree that I think that there should be lay people sitting in on any commission as well as clergy. To judge the bishops in this situation, and it should be more transparent. The problem about it being transparent is that in the United States and the UK we have a system basically of common law which doesn't apply. It doesn't apply in Europe, not just in the Vatican. It doesn't apply in Europe. They operate in a different fashion, so it's more difficult for us in the Anglo-Saxon world to see these processes moving in the way that we would think openly, and justice must be seen to be done. It doesn't happen like that on the continent, and certainly not in the Vatican.
Well, Barbara Blaine, previous Pope John Paul II actually apologized historically for abuse by priests, and he also set up a body called the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Now, this was supposed to be a very powerful watchdog within the church. That was way back in the early 2000s. That has not produced very many results. Ecclesiastical courts were set up, but their proceedings were secret, and no information leaked out about exactly what happened. Do you think that the nature of the pontiff himself who's starting these proceedings is important in terms of the strength that they are given to exercise. Do you think that Pope Francis's move will lead to greater results, for example, than did that of Pope John Paul II?
I think that apologies are wonderful, but they don't protect children. And I think that setting up committees and panels and establishing new policies and procedures are lovely. They're great public relations maneuvers. But I don't believe any of that protects children. So when and if we see a bishop disciplined for transferring the predator priest, I think then maybe children could be safer. But until then, this is all mere, it's all fluff in a sense. It's not having an impact that protects kids. And let's be honest. There are these bad apples, the sexual perpetrators that have infiltrated the priesthood. We know they're a small percentage. We assume that, but they're there. But the worst problem is that bishops conceal and cover up for them and enable them. And when I'm talking about transferring a bishop, it's not the same as transferring a predator priest. The bishop of Kansas City who was found guilty, actually it was in 2012 that he was found guilty, and he wasn't removed from that post until just last month. And when he was removed, there was no reason given for his removal. So we don't know whether it was for the fact that he has been, that he had this criminal conviction. We don't know whether, and the conviction was not for abusing the children. That conviction was for endangering children because that bishop transferred a perpetrator priest who was abusing and violating little girls in the parish, in parishes. But so when I'm suggesting transferring a bishop, there is no reason that Pope Francis couldn't have removed that bishop from Kansas City, Bishop Finn, long before last month. And then the huge insult was when a week later, after the bishop was removed, then there was an announcement that the bishop would go ahead and perform the ordination of the new priest for that diocese. And we all know that during the ordination ceremony that the priests take a vow of obedience to the bishop. So how ironic that these new priests are taking a vow of obedience to a bishop who is a criminal.
Well, Jack Valero, there are proceedings underway. We've made a reference to it, for example, in Minneapolis and St. Paul. There's an indictment against the archdiocese there, investigations by the authorities because the bishop allegedly failed to provide information about a sexual abuse by one of his priests. Now, these proceedings, as you've made clear, are civil criminal proceedings separate to the affairs of the commission, are they not?
I'd like to say that we don't have any bishops moving predator priests at the moment. In Britain, we have had very tough rules, which we have been living with for 12 years. And it's very clear that if any abuse takes place, the priest is out, investigated. And if he's found guilty, he's out. And this one strike, you're out. Zero tolerance has been going on for 12 years in the UK and the US. And so there is no moving around. But just in case there is no following of the procedures, then the bishops will also be held accountable now. But let's remember that all these civil processes are still going on, have been going on, and they're all public. So we know when a priest has been indicted, this is a public thing. And then when the internal process of the church says, well, okay, you are out of the priesthood, that becomes public also. So I don't think there is any secrecy at the moment. And the process has been working well. This is one more step. I mean, Barbara Blaine was talking about making children safer. Of course, that's the aim. But I do think that in the UK, children are very safe in the Catholic Church. We have found abuse going on in schools, in public schools. We have found abuse going on by members of parliament, in the BBC. We have found abuse everywhere, and we're dealing with it. This is abuse. This is a society that didn't know how to handle abuse, And the church was right in the center of that as well as all these other institutions. So we have at the moment going on an inquiry in the UK of institutional abuse of all these institutions, and this is going on for the next 3 years. The procedures that have been put in place in the church are at the cutting edge of what needs to be done for child protection, and other institutions that have found this problem, which have been many in the UK in the last 5 years, many, are looking at the Catholic Church to set up similar guidelines for protection of children.
Well, Barbara Blaine, it appears that you disagree with that contention.
I mean, I think it's ludicrous to think that everything's solved and that we have this great process in place. I can tell you that
well, it's not fine. It's not fine. It's work in progress. It's work in progress. It's obviously not fine. We're working towards it.
The process makes it almost impossible. I mean, the current investigation that's going on in the UK is great, and I'm not suggesting that. What I'm referring to is this assumption that you know, in these past 12 years that everything has turned around, and that in the United States and in the UK, where there is this zero tolerance policy, that children are now safe. And all I can say is that that's simply not true. And many victims who, you know, many of the victims who do come forward and do so at great personal expense, and it takes a great deal of courage. And it's embarrassing. It's painful.
Well, let me just go. Apologies for interrupting, Barbara, but I just wanted to go to Michael Walsh and get his view on this particular point. The zero tolerance policy, has this really been enforced, do you believe, within the church?
Well, there are two things. You say in the church, and Jack Valero, Jack was talking about the UK, which brought in a zero tolerance policy, as he said,
Agreed.
it was 12 years ago, but quite a long time ago, and it was followed by the US too. The fact is that the number of new cases within the church of child abuse has dropped dramatically. There are lots of things perhaps emerging from the woodwork from the past, but the situation is such now that that there are fewer and fewer cases being reported of recent examples of sex abuse. So you can see the system is actually working. Whether it's working around the world or not, is a different question. But I think that the Vatican has attempted to impose the same sort of rules that were first started in the UK and then in the US, right across the church.
Barbara Blaine, very quickly, your response to that we do have a process here, you do have a development that could be a real move towards ending or scrutinizing abuse by priests?
I think two things. First of all, that the average age of victim reports is age 42. So the children who may have been abused in the last decade or so probably are not able to report yet. So we shouldn't, it would be, it's reckless to assume that a smaller number coming forward means that everything has been cleaned up. And the other thing is that that a lot of this could be eliminated if the church officials would stop the secrecy and just open up their files and turn over all the records to police. And children would be immediately safe if the church officials would even admit and post the names of the priests who they know are actual perpetrators. And many of these sexual perpetrators have admitted their crimes. And even when they admit them to church officials, the church officials still conceal and cover it up. And we know that under then Cardinal Ratzinger, that every bishop in the country has been told and is to be sending all information about sex crimes to the CDF in the Vatican. And
well,
we
at that particular point, Barbara, I'm afraid that we've run out of our time for the discussion. My thanks to our guests, Michael Walsh, Barbara Blaine, and Jack Valero. And thank you for watching. As always, we would like to hear your thoughts. You can contact us on our program page at aljazeera.com. You can also post your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story or tweet us at AJ Inside Story. From me, Mike Hanna, and the whole team here, goodbye for now.